Hello, my wonderful, beautiful friends, guys. Welcome back to our /PettyRevenge, where people get little wins on others and the stories are super satisfying. And in today's episode, we've got bike thieves, bad bosses, parking lot Karens, nasty teachers, and neighborhood troublemakers, all getting taught lessons they won't forget. Guys, I hope you enjoy the stories today. Hit subscribe if you're not subscribed, and as always, you can send or link your post to this email right here. Let's dive in. So I first moved to the Netherlands about 9 months ago, so I bought a new bike once I got here. I found a local bike shop and I got a nice one. And after some friendly chat with the guy in the shop about bike thieves, he gave me a free chain for my bike. It was a thick chain with a black covering. I'll never forget it. Skip to 2 months later, and I come home tired with a bunch of shopping, and I leave my bike by the bike racks just outside my house. I honestly can't remember whether or not I locked it. The next morning, I rush out the door to get to university and my bike is gone. I'm livid. I end up having to take the bus for almost a week, which is very expensive, and resort to buying a crappy bike to save costs. I couldn't buy a better bike until about 2 months later. I did report it to the police, but there's not much they could do. But I start devising a plan for an unlikely opportunity. I still had the key for that chain lock, and I had hoped I left my bike unlocked. So I spend the next couple of weeks constantly eyeing every bike on the road, hoping to see my baby. Skip forward to last week. I was sitting in the main square with my girlfriend, having some ice cream. I start to people watch, and that's when I notice a couple about our age park their bikes near where we were sitting and disappear into the busy ice cream shop. And guess what caught my eye? It was my bike with the chain lock still on it. It turns out I never locked it, and the person who stole the bike left the lock on. That's when adrenaline kicks in, as the details of my plan come back to me. Before I overthink it, I walk over and I lock my lock around the back wheel, and I come back to my seat. The other people sitting outside didn't take much notice of me. It's some time before the couple come back out, so we decide to chill on a curb nearby. The couple come back out and we're in earshot, but they can't see us. The conversation goes something like this. Now, they spent ages trying to find explanations, so this is a short version of their conversation. The boy was basically like, "What the F? Someone put a lock around my bike." That's when the girl says, "Did some random person just put the extra lock on your bike?" The boy says, "Yeah." He then starts unlocking his bike, and the girl says, "Wasn't that chain just hanging around your seat?" The boy stays silent, and the girl goes on and says, "Oh crap, maybe the guy you stole it from locked it again." The boy says, "Unlikely. I mean, maybe someone cut the lock, got a new one, and they're just trying to mess with me." He then says more confidently, "I think Alan's trying to screw me over for yesterday." They both then laugh and seem pretty confident that this is a friend's prank, and I could not have wished it better. The guy then leaves to go find a shop that sells bolt cutters, and the girl stays back to watch over the bikes. I send my girlfriend to the girl to ask for directions and to lead her away from the bikes, making the conversation long enough for me to sneak around and quietly unlock the bike. My heart's pounding so hard that I'm surprised I'm not louder, with my hand shaking so much. I click the lock closed after I wrapped it around the bike seat, and she hears that and starts to yell. I hop on, and before I know it, I'm halfway down the road and her cries die out in the distance. I give a little whoop as relief washes over me. My girlfriend continues acting like a tourist even after I got the bike back. So the girl had no faces to report to police. Poor guy though, it must have been awful to have your bike stolen. You know, as a person who's had their bike stolen way back when I was in grade 8, guys, never to be seen again, I can't tell you the amount of satisfaction I felt reading this post. I just love how OP's plan perfectly went down, and he was sneaking around like a ninja to get it back. But honestly, if I were in OP's shoes, there would have been none of that. Like, if that were me, I would have danced right up to my bike, unlocked it in front of that girl's face, and then locked my chain around her bike, because what's she gonna do? Call the cops and say that the rightful owner stole their bike back? That said though, you know how they say that most thieves aren't so smart? case in point, guys. Like, those thieves had the bike for months, and they never once thought that they should try to cut off the lock that was on the bike. Like, I would never steal from anybody, but that's just common sense, right? So a couple of years ago, a job with housing fell through. So I was stuck in a strange town and state with no money or home. I got a job waitressing and a side gig at night cleaning, and I did all the hours I could. I was tired, dirty, and hungry for 3 months until I found a person that needed a roommate. Things did get better, and I even got a cat to keep me company. Luckily, the town was near a tourist area, and enough folks got lost on their way to tourist places that the diner I worked at was busy, but Sundays were the worst. The locals on Sunday didn't tip, and without tips, I went hungry. One Sunday, a local family left a $100 tip. I saw the bill, and I was instantly excited, but the tip turned out to be fake, with a sermon on the back. And it was stamped with a local church name and address. I was salty at that, of course. And here's the thing. For over a year, that same family came in. I very gently tried to tell the man how disappointed I was when it wasn't a tip. But he said riches in God were better. The guy never tipped at all for the whole time I was there. Just stupid fake dollar bills with the same sermon and church on the back. And then in September, a hurricane came through. The diner was flooded and is closed. Since I didn't have a job anymore, I could go to church on Sunday if I wanted. I bought a lottery ticket and I went to that church with the $100 sermon. The same guy was there, and it turns out he was the pastor. There were only 30 people in that church, and it had lost a part of the roof in the storm. The people seemed nice, and I knew them mostly from the diner, even though I didn't know their names. I never went to church much since I was a kid, so it was different. They took an offering, and I put in my $2 lottery ticket. The next week, I went again with another lottery ticket. The $100 pastor teased me that he had never gotten a lottery ticket in the basket before, and I told him he was getting another one. Maybe God would make him lucky. The guy thought it was funny. Then, the next week, I took a fake lottery ticket in. My brother had given it to me, and he told me it was fake because he didn't want to hurt my feelings. I held onto it because it was from him. I put that in the basket. The fourth week was the last week I was there. I got a job in Cincinnati, and I was gonna drive up there that day. The folks at the church all knew because I told them the week before, and they were all saying goodbye. That's when the $100 pastor comes up to me, and he really quietly scolds me before I leave. The guy tells me it had been really hurtful to think he had won the lottery, as it was a substantial amount of money and could help with his personal finances, and that it turned out to be a joke. He then told me I should think about it as I drive to my new job. That's when I told him that now he knew how I felt, when he kept giving me fake hundreds when I was sleeping in my car and hungry. I left, and I was happy about it the whole drive north. It's the best thing I've ever done. Oh boy, the satisfaction must have been priceless when OP dropped that on him. And guys, I also find it so funny that the guy kept tipping OP with fake money because, in his words, riches in God were better. But at the same time, the guy was mad he didn't win real money to help with his finances. Ain't that some BS? I only wish OP threw the same line right back at him before she walked out the door. Okay, so this happened many years ago, but it popped into my head earlier, so I thought I'd share. Back in 1994, I bought a 1989 Ford Escort as a work beater to drive the 25 miles each way, back and forth to work. The car was in good shape, and it got great gas mileage because it was a 4-speed manual. Now, I try to take care of my vehicles, but I don't overly obsess about them. But when someone dings it up because they're careless and have no regard for other people's property, I get mad. That said, one day before work, I went to Best Buy to pick up the brand new Korn CD. I bought the CD and went out to my car to open it to give it a listen. As I was unwrapping it, a lady in a brand new Ford Taurus just pulls into this parking spot on my right. The woman flings open her door and she bangs the edge of her door into the middle of my passenger door. It hit real hard, enough that I knew it had to have left at least a dent or a gnarly paint chip. I looked up at her, expecting her to apologize. Instead, she gave me a dirty look, closed her door, and then walked away, and that instantly pissed me off. That's when I decided if she wanted to act like an entitled bitch, I was gonna teach her a lesson. I waited until she was about 75 feet away, and then leaned over and unlatched my passenger door. I then twisted my body in the seat and lifted my right leg over the shifter. I then proceeded to boot my passenger door open as hard as I could into her door. The door hit so hard that it left a crease in her door. No amount of touch-up paint was going to fix it. It was so loud that the woman turns around to see what happened, immediately realizing that I had bashed my door into hers. And the woman comes marching back towards her car, swearing up a storm at me, calling me every single name in the book. At that moment, I just start up my car and I drive forward out of my parking space before she got closer than 10 feet to my car. I gave her a fake smile, a quick wave, and a couple of beeps of the horn as I drove away, while the woman just stood there fuming, cussing up a storm. Oh, the good old days before everyone had camera phones, right? Like, what a time to be alive in 1994. I'm just assuming nothing ever happened to OP since they shared the story and they didn't mention cops or anything. But yeah, did Karen deserve what OP did to her car? Guys, you be the judge. I will, however, say that Karen needs to learn 2 rules. Rule number 1, you should never disrespect a beater car because you never know, some may have nothing to lose. And number 2, if you clearly piss somebody off, don't leave your brand new car right next to them because again, you never ever know. So I'm an attorney, and I used to work at a state government office where I had 2 supervisors, one for my practice group and one for my section, who from the very beginning decided to make it their business to treat me like crap. The section chief had a habit of sitting on client questions for days, and then assigning them to me. Then, when the client would ask why it was taking so long to do their stuff, she would respond that I was the one working on that stuff, making it look like the delay was my fault. Similarly, the group supervisor's favorite cock-weasel-tree was to try to get me in trouble with both clients and higher-ups in our office for not doing things fast enough, despite the fact that she would procrastinate for weeks on reviewing and signing off on work I actually did very fast indeed. But what these idiots did not know was that A, I was saving all the emails they sent me that would include information like dates they assigned me work, etc. And B, one of the aforementioned higher-ups was my former boss during an externship in law school. So the guy liked me and he knew I wasn't lazy or an idiot. So one day, the group supervisor assigns me a question from our client agency involving a citizen's public records request. And I prepared a draft response within an hour and I sent it back to her. I needed her to sign off on it before I advised the client. But here's the thing. Despite my getting a red receipt for my email, she didn't respond for the rest of the day. Or the rest of the week. The client was supposed to answer the records request within a tight deadline under the law, and eventually they emailed the group supervisor to ask where the hell their answer was. The group supervisor finally woke up, and she forwards her original email assigning me the work to the section chief to complain that I didn't do it in good time. And then the section chief forwards that to the client and told them it was my fault it wasn't done yet. So finally having had enough, I rubbed my little hands together in delight and proceeded to 1. Reply all to section chief's email to client, attaching my email to group supervisor containing the draft response. I then innocently write, apologies for the inconvenience, client. Our office rule is to wait for supervisory sign-off before providing advice, but I've nevertheless attached draft advice prepared on this date. Group supervisor and section chief, do you agree with this advice? May the client act upon it. And number 2, forward that response to my former boss and very politely ask him, in instances where there is a tight time frame to respond to a client question, is it okay to provide the client with provisional draft advice like this within the deadline, but let them know that a supervisor needs a little more time to do their review and sign off? The client ends up praising me for my efforts to get a response to him in a timely fashion, and my former boss thanked me for my question, but he said it should have never been an issue in the first place. Then, he sent out an office-wide notice to remind the supervisors that they must provide necessary sign-offs on advice within the deadlines, and they must never blame those under them for delays in front of clients because that affects the image of the whole office. He also attached the emails in my matter as an example of what supervisors should not do. So literally everyone in the office saw what incompetent ass clowns those two were. Now that is a sweet victory right there, and that's why you should always cover your ass when you suspect, in OP's word, cockweaseltry going on at your workplace. What a unique word that is. What made it even more amazing is that OP's former boss even attached those emails as an example of what not to do in the workplace, calling out those two fools. Like, what kind of a-holes throw people under the bus in front of clients like that? And guys, the sad thing about this is, OP said that those two only got promoted through the magic of seniority. Like, why are such a-holes always getting promoted is my question. I went to the first grade in the early 80s at a small school that was affiliated with the church we attended, the ones my parents got married in. This is relevant. This was in a smallish city in the Pacific Northwest. Kindergarten was delightful and I loved my teacher. She was kind and loving to all the kids. First grade, however, was a nightmare. This teacher, who we'll call Mrs. Hagner, was probably late 20s and she was a scarecrow of a woman, and she was one of the cruelest human beings I've ever met. I was just a happy kid, and my best pal was a sweet girl whose parents were friends with my parents. We were just excited to go to big kid school. Mrs. Hagner, for some reason that I couldn't figure out, never warmed up to us. She was super sweet to the other kids, but she was always curt and very quickly cruel to the two of us. Some memories that stick out to me is she starts to refer to us as the bad kids to the other kids in class. I know that I was well behaved, even more so than the other kids, but that doesn't matter. By mid-year, the other kids all knew us as bad, and they would happily make up all kinds of bad behaviors to report to her, saying we swore, we stole things, etc. And nothing of that sort ever happened. I also want to add that I was terrified of her, and at that point, I barely spoke at all because her responses were always cruel. She lavished them with hugs and praise for this, so of course it got worse. Every day at playtime, she would instruct the class that we were not allowed to play because we were the bad kids. We were always forced to stand outside of the group without speaking. The son of the principal was her favorite. She deputized him as the good kid who would speak up for me if I need to go to the bathroom, etc. It was endless. One particularly cruel memory was when she put me in the garbage can and she made me stand there as she directed the class to put their lunch garbage in it as punishment for fidgeting in class. I was 6 years old at this point, and I remember crying as I stood there, my feet soaked in milk, applesauce, juice, and when my mom asked about my shoes being ruined, I told the truth, and Mrs. Hagner lied. She said I climbed into the garbage. Most days, I was forbidden to speak, move, or even ask for anything. To do so would incur verbal abuse and more punishment. The other kids were forbidden to speak to me or even acknowledge that I was there. I didn't understand it. I was just a little boy, and I wanted so badly for my teacher to like me. I didn't know why she loved all the other kids, but was always so cruel to me. I started to cry after school, and I became withdrawn. After speaking with their friends, whose daughter was my friend, and comparing notes, my parents put 2 and 2 together, and they finally realized what we were enduring, and they enrolled me in a public school where I thrived. My dad, who didn't understand or want controversy in his church, thought that was the end of it. My mom had other plans though. At the time, my mom was still learning English, but she knew something was terribly wrong. Wrong with the school and wrong with Mrs. Hagner. When my parents were married, a group of women in the church objected to the pastor marrying them because my mom was Mexican and my dad was white. And yes, it was that kind of church in that kind of town. The pastor told them to pound sand, and Mrs. Hagner was one of those ladies. My friend's parents were fine people. They were working poor, but I think they were seen as from the wrong side of the tracks, and they weren't really seen as the right type. So within 3 years, my mom perfected her English and she gets a degree in education, all the while raising us and working her ass off. She got a job as a teacher, and then she got her master's degree, and she taught in my school district for 30 years. My mom was loved, respected, and an effective educator. A few years ago, I mentioned that school, and that it had shuttered a few years after I left. I also said I remember how mean Mrs. Hagner was. My mother, the kindest, sweetest, most loving lady in the world, looked at me and then she calmly told me this. She tells me that woman was evil. What she did to you and that little girl was wrong. When that woman tried to apply to the public schools, I told them what she did to you. For years, every time, every year. For 25 years, I stopped every administration in every school from hiring her. She hurt kids and she hurt you, a little boy, and your friend was just a little girl. You don't do that to any little kid, so I effing ruined her. To my knowledge, Mrs. Hagner never saw the inside of a classroom as a teacher again. My mother, now the most loving retired grandma in the world to my kids, spent almost 3 decades, coldly, relentlessly, and with great patience wrecking any chance that monster had to ever teach again. Mom, you are a treasure. What a story that was, guys, and seriously, OP's mom's a freaking hero for doing that. Like, she probably saved so many students from going through what OP went through. Like, just reading that she made OP stand in the garbage can and had other kids throw their garbage in it, that boils my freaking blood. Like, what a nasty woman. Like, who does that to a freaking 6-year-old? Like, I'm just shuddering thinking of what was allowed to go on in the early 80s in schools, especially in the smaller towns. And guys, going through the comments, it's absolutely wild what was going on. This person comments, my dad was getting paddled every day when he was in grade school. This was in the 1930s. He wasn't doing anything wrong, just a horrible teacher, a male. His dad met the teacher when he was getting off work for the day. He beat him badly in the parking lot. He never touched my dad again. And this person says, your mom is a treasure. My first teacher, Mrs. E, was a monster. This was back when you were allowed to beat your kids with a cane in England, early 1970s. This monster liked to hit her class of 4-year-olds with a cane for the crime of talking or asking questions. I was a good kid, but forever asking questions. And she thought it was an appropriate punishment to stand me in the corner wearing a dunce's hat. Who thinks it's appropriate to beat 4-year-olds? What a C word. F you, Mrs. E. I hope you're having a nice time in hell. Last month, I was visiting my parents during spring break. At about 9 o'clock at night, we were sitting in the living room talking. My parents live in a pretty rural area. We heard a big truck engine come barreling down our road, followed by a big crash and some laughter and yelling. We went out to investigate and we found my dad's mailbox completely bashed in by what appeared to be a baseball bat. My dad is very mild-mannered and soft in his old age, so we kind of laugh it off. And my dad was pretty chill about teenagers having some fun. No problem, he said. It's happened before. I have another mailbox in the garage. The next morning, we put up the other mailbox and we thought nothing more of it. Well, that night, right around the same time, I was sitting in the same chair reading a book when I heard the same loud engine come barreling down the road. I thought to myself, oh crap, here it comes. It was the same thing, a loud bang followed by some yelling and laughter. We went out there again to see the same sight. His backup mailbox was bashed in. My dad, playing it off said, "Once I can take, but twice they're just setting themselves up. I think it's time we teach them a lesson." Without knowing what Dad had planned, I went to bed excited that night about getting some revenge with Pops the next day. We live in a small town, so without TV and internet, this was the most entertainment I was going to have all week. The next day, I rode with my dad down to Home Depot. We found the biggest, juiciest tin mailbox they had. Like, the thing was huge. Just looking at it made me want to bash the crap out of it. He also purchased a much smaller mailbox and some concrete. We got home and he mixes the concrete up. We then put the smaller mailbox inside the bigger one, and then poured concrete in between the two, so there was probably 6 inches of pure concrete in between. We then mount the mailbox, and we stood there looking at it, so proud of what we had done. The rest of the day went so slow, as the anticipation of that night was too much for me to bear. At about 8:30, my dad and I set up a couple of lawn chairs in the shadow of the front lawn, and we kicked back with a couple of beers. Well, right on cue, about 9:03, we hear it. The same old truck comes hauling ass down our road. About 50 yards before they get to our mailbox, it slows down to about 10 miles per hour or so. We could make out the 3 to 4 teenagers in the back of the truck. One of them stands up and he cocks back with a baseball bat. The truck slowed down a tad more as it rolls up to our concrete box. The dude then takes a huge Barry Bonds swing at that thing, and all we hear is ding. The noise was so loud, it had to have broke that kid's arm. He immediately screams, "Holy crap!" They then stop the truck for a second, and all the kids were laughing their ass off. The kid starts cursing up a storm, and that's when another kid walks to the mailbox to investigate. He opens the box, and he just starts laughing. A couple of other kids went to look as well. After they drove off, we went over to look at it. There was a small dent in the side. We had a good laugh and called it a night. My dad told me last night that he hasn't had any problems since. So yeah, teenagers bashed 2 of my dad's mailboxes, and we fill a big tin mailbox with concrete, and we watch the same kid break his wrist trying to bash it a 3rd time. And that, my friends, brings us to another end of r/ Petty Revenge. Guys, I hope you enjoyed today's stories. Consider subscribing so you don't miss these crazy stories. And if you missed the last episode on the channel, it's an r/ entitled People episode, where a psycho Karen lawyer tries to jail somebody for embarrassing him. It's such a wild episode, so go check it out if you haven't. And myself and Stevie Boy will see you guys in the next one. We love you.